Hello and welcome to the program Woke Up. And today is going to be a wonderful message about the mind virus of wokeism and critical social justice theories and how it affects a human being on the most profound level, how it totally distorts their worldview. And we have on our show an incredibly articulate and fascinating woman who's extremely talented, brilliant, and she was seduced by the ideology of wokeism that left her viewing the world through a lens that distorted everything and distorted reality and really affected her personality. And it was several years of darkness that she endured. And ultimately, we're going to talk about what happened, how she was seduced, what her life was like, and then how she got an incredible liberation from critical social justice ideology, which is impacting all aspects of our society and families right now. And so please, let's give our attention to Annabella Rockwell. She's from Florida. And Annabella, thank you for coming on the show. And I would just like you to just get right into it and just start telling your story about what happened to you.
Thank you, Michael, so much for having me. And I'm really happy to be on a show called Woke Up because that's exactly what I did. And it's the right woke. My story starts it's really 2011, but I'll go back a little bit farther. So, just a little bit about me. I'm an only child. I'm from New York City. My parents divorced at a really young age, but they were always in my life. I always had a really good relationship with my family, super close with my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents, my cousins. I went to church on the weekends and I was an athlete. So I grew up competitively figure skating. I also traveled the world. It was really important to my mom that she take me everywhere. So I see everything and was exposed to a lot of different cultures. I've even spent some summers in China. So I did see, communism firsthand as a teenager, which is so interesting that I had this kind of worldview. I lived in the Bahamas for a bit, actually, for middle school. So, kind of this really eclectic background, and even just being from New York, you're exposed to so much. Um, so I went to school in 2011. I went to Mount Holyoke. It's the oldest women's college in the country. It is academically revered. It was founded in 1837. I was so excited when I got in because the seven sisters, I only looked at seven sisters in small liberal arts schools because they were so academic. And I knew that I'm a very social person. So I didn't need to go to a party school because I'd always find the party, but I would maybe have trouble finding the classroom. So I was like, I need to go to a really academic environment where the rest of the student body is super nerdy so that I'm just surrounded by that. So, I went into school with this mindset that I'm so eager to learn. Everyone around me is going to be so much smarter than me, which is what I wanted. I also was very open minded. I was very happy. I was very free thinking. And I also, like I said, I'd grown up in church. So I did have a relationship with God. So 2011, I enter school. Um, those 4 years that I was at school completely changed me from the inside out, from someone very happy and free and open minded to someone very close minded, very woke, and very obsessed with radical feminism, racism, CRT, basically all the tenets of wokeism. For me, the one that I really clung to was feminism, and this idea that America was a systematic patriarchy and that I didn't realize as a woman I'd actually been oppressed my entire life, that my mother had been, that my grandmother had been. And I was so burdened by this weight of, oh my gosh, there is this invisible patriarchy and it's now my duty to upend it. Um,
So what was going on in the university? Like what was it in the classrooms? Was it in the ethos? Like what was alluring to you? What was happening? And what was the messaging going on at Mount Holyoke?
Great question. So it's all of it. It's the ethos, it's the environment, it's the classroom, it's the student body, it's also the administration. So I want to tell you that about 70% of college admin are either liberal or very liberal. And that's a statistic you can look up and hold me to it. So really the administration is far left. And then that seeps into the professors that they hire, which then seeps into what the professors are teaching the student body and then the environment on campus. So as soon as I got there, um, it was culture shock. It was Western Massachusetts, so I was really far away from my family, having come from Florida because I was living in Florida by then. So were my parents. Um, so already it's a different environment. Western Massachusetts is very like the way I explain it is kind of crunchy, like a lot of plaid, and everyone was there was a big encouragement to dress sort of androgynous. Like, it was very cool. Like, I would see girls on campus and not really know if they were girls or boys, even though it was a women's college. And in orientation, I was given a little letter in my mailbox that said, don't assume someone's identity. He may be she may be he, she may be they, whatever. And I'm being told about pronouns. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? Like, I had no idea that anyone, explored gender this way, right? I was immediately told gender is a spectrum. So where I had thought gender was always, okay, let me take a step back. I had never thought about gender. This is the thing. This had never been a thought that occurred to me that, like, I was in this box of being a woman. Like, I always knew I was a girl. I went to girls' schools. I played on girls' sports teams. But it didn't occur to me that, like, I was in this weird, this like super hyper gendered box until I got to school, where they're telling me gender's a spectrum. You've been lied to. It's completely fluid. Sexuality is completely fluid. Like, things are not black and white. So my whole outlook on just first relationships is completely deconstructed, and everyone else is engaging in this. So all the student body, there's a lot of students that are experimenting with their pronouns. And now, as an incoming student, I'm being taught how to censor myself before I speak to someone. I'm being told, okay, let me take a moment and think about, I can't assume how this person identifies. So already, like, the programming is as soon as you step on campus, because you're told what you thought was always the case is not actually the case. So that was the first, like, glaring thing. And also, the student body was very, very queer, and the active, like, social this the active social scene was very queer. So it was really encouraged, and you're really encouraged to experiment, push your own boundaries, do things that maybe you never would have done. And I think that mindset, in conjunction with this party culture, you just really quickly step into, like, whoa, everything I thought was true actually isn't. And I'm learning this whole new world, and this is actually reality.
And so this was absolutely ubiquitous everywhere, from the mailboxes, from the messaging, from professors, from colleagues, classmates, and from the administration, top down, inside out, all throughout the campus was this doubting of gender, or looking at the world through these cynical lenses of critical theory. It seems like on every single level.
And if you thought that maybe it was kind of weird, you were shamed, you couldn't say anything. Like, if I all of a sudden started to say, like, meh, I don't know, like, I kind of think you're a girl, that I would have been ostracized immediately. There actually were some conservative students who, in the first year, I remember this is actually interesting. Laura Loomer, who ran for Congress, and she's a public figure. She went to my school, and she was there. We lived in the same dorm our first year, and she actually ended up transferring. And I remember her so distinctly because she had really strong convictions. She was very pro-Israel. That was one of the topics that she was bullied for online, was how pro-Israel she was and how conservative she was. And I didn't really know her. We weren't really friends. And I also wasn't that invested in ideology yet. I thought it was kind of wrong that, like, she was bullied online, but I didn't really understand the depth of it until I kind of fell into it, and then found myself acting that way also, where I was criticizing people for their beliefs.
And so it seems like it was thought control, mind control, speech control. If you did not toe the party line, you were shamed or canceled in a way.
My sophomore year was the Romney-Obama election, and that was the first time I could ever vote, and I actually voted for Mitt Romney. And I remember thinking, like, "Oh, my grandmother's voting for him, like, fiscally conservative, that's what I'm interested in." Like, I wasn't even concerned about social issues. I was like, "We're not gonna regress socially as a country," because that was the narrative on campus, is that, like I said, there was a very active, queer population on the student body, and their feeling was like, if Mitt Romney is elected, they're going to have all their rights taken away. Or, as a woman, if Mitt Romney is elected, we're going to have our rights taken away. I didn't even understand that yet, this idea. So my sophomore year, during this election, I remember I told some friends that I had voted for Mitt Romney, and I was totally shamed, bullied, embarrassed, and basically beaten into submission, where finally I was like, okay, I must be wrong because everyone around me thinks this way. Um, And then it was my junior year that I took a gender studies course, and in that gender studies course, between the professor and the books that we read and the essays that we had to write, the topics we had to explore, that class was absolute brainwashing, absolutely indoctrination. And then every class I took thereafter had some sort of woke bias. It wasn't just history, it was race, gender, and empire. And let's demonize, the white explorer, the colonists. Like, let's look at all these things from a really negative lens. Religion is negative. Every city that I remember thinking that every city that was founded in America was founded because someone left whatever religious body that they were in because they weren't tolerated. So they had to go start anew. So I'm being told that like religion is, creates intolerance, and there's this emphasis on tolerating everything. So I just was completely brainwashed, completely.
And so, what was it? Was it just a sociological pressures, or was there the ideology itself? Was that seductive to you, or was it the ethos that was developed and you were afraid to step outside the box because you're in this incredible university, incredible history with geniuses? I mean, there's to get
Mhm.
into that school, to become a professor, and even to get admitted, you have to be really, two or three standard deviations in terms of the average IQ. So there must have been a lot going on there with incredibly intelligent people that were influencing you. So was it the ideology, or was it the ethos itself that seduced you?
I think it was a combination of both. You're right that the professors, they are career academics. Most of them held degrees from Ivy League institutions, so they're very revered and you look up to them. And if they're speaking about an issue, if they're taking something really minute, like let's say transgenderism, which up until college I had never met anyone that was transgender. And there were many transgender students while I was there, and this was before we even saw it in the mainstream culture to the extent that we do now. Um, it's not something I had ever thought about. But if you have a professor that, has a Harvard degree that's teaching you in a small seminar style classroom that transgenderism is actually like the most important social cause, you're going to be really drawn to that because A, you respect that person, you trust that person that's teaching you, but also the ideology is very seductive. And the way it's seductive is in a sense that you feel so intellectual. You're like nourished with these ideas and you're unpacking everything. And maybe you're with your fellow classmates and you're in a dorm and everyone's drinking wine. And there's just this air of like, we're so academic, we're so brilliant, we're just discussing all these ideas. You know, the irony is like the privilege in that, just being able to do that.
Yes.
And and we couldn't see that, like the students don't see that we were so hyper privileged being in this really safe environment, being on a college campus, honestly. But at the same time, we're saying that we're victims because the world is so evil and we here in this environment are, fixing all of the world's problems. So yes, it is very, I think seductive is a really good word to use for it. It's appealing.
And then what was happening with your relationships outside of that echo chamber? Uh, Primary relationships with family and friends, or maybe conservative friends that you used to have. What was going on within your mindset, and how was this being manifested in with those relationships?
So as I'm going through this change on campus, realizing, oh my gosh, everything I ever thought is wrong, I'm now burdened with this idea of like, I have to share this. I have to spread this. Like, okay, let's just focus on the women issue. Like women are really oppressed. I have to explain this to my mom and to my grandmother. And so I would go home on vacations and I would tell them like, women couldn't have credit cards. We have no rights. Like, just so burdened by this. Couldn't really even give concrete examples. And my mom would turn around and look at me and be like, "What are you talking about? You have had every opportunity. I've given you everything." She always worked. It was just not rooted in reality, but it didn't matter because I was so bought in. And so my relationships at home got so tense because my mom was like, "I'm not handling this." And the more I went back to school, the further I got into this. So, it starts with just a little bit of like, oh my gosh, women are oppressed. Then it's like, oh, sexuality is a spectrum. Well, maybe I should explore mine, or maybe I'm not what I always thought I was. So I'm all of a sudden questioning all of my identities, feeling like the people that have known me my whole life, which is my family, don't actually know me. And I'm rewriting my own history in my head because I'm being told from people around me that, oh, your family doesn't really love you if they don't accept you and how you're expressing yourself right now. So it was really heartbreaking, honestly. I felt like my family didn't love me conditionally, which isn't true. Like, that's a really awful lie that I was told. I was told on campus that if my mom doesn't accept me for wanting to, okay, here's one a concrete example. I became an atheist while I was at school and I came home on vacation. I was like, "Mom, are you still believing that Jesus nonsense?" Which I can't even imagine how heartbreaking it must have been for her to
Mhm.
hear me say something like that, and it hurts me just even thinking that I said something like that. But she looked at me and was like, "You're not my daughter," in response to that. Whereas I'm now going back to campus saying, "Well, I'm an atheist and my family doesn't accept it." And so then your peers are telling you, "Oh, your family just doesn't love you."
Mm.
Which is a lie. It's a lie. In fact, your family does love you. Your family knows you and they know that that's not you and that you're going down a path that's ultimately going to cause you a lot of hurt and despair.
Wow, it's so subversive toward primary relationships, subverting your relationship with God, your relationship with your family, with your parents. And did you just feel like you were absolutely right? Were you developing a sense of uh, narcissistic hedonism where could do whatever you want and believe whatever you want and it didn't matter? Or were you tormented within yourself?
I was more the tormented victim, feeling like everything I'd ever been told was a lie. I now have this whole new world perspective. I now have to change everything. I also have to forge a completely new path. So it's very lonely, it's very isolating. And like I said before, about 70% of college administrators are liberal or very liberal, so left or very left. The roots of leftism we know are Marxism. And Karl Marx made it very clear that the family unit is a tool of capitalism. Capitalism is a tool of oppression, and anything
Mm.
that's oppressive has to be destroyed. So it makes perfect sense to me in reflection that, of course, the family unit is is attacked while you're on campus. Of course, you're told, turn away from your parents. They don't love you. They don't accept you. We're not told instead, like, we're all kind of learning this. Like, your parents are human. They're doing the best they can. Like, maybe your approach isn't the proper approach. Like this, we have to be so rooted in what we believe that we can't even communicate with the other side. Like that's another tactic of Marxism is, you know, you're right, don't discuss it, don't even bother with that person. So there is a level of narcissism, I guess.
And can you speak on behalf of your mom? Like, what was she feeling, and your dad? What were they thinking? And it must have been incredibly painful losing their daughter to a cult.
That's exactly what happened. I feel like I was a part of a cult, and being on the other side of it, I know that I was not me for a few years, and I, am very sad for that former self. Um, my mom was heartbroken. She was devastated. I'm an only child. It's
Yeah.
it. I really, really put my parents through hell. I think my dad, on the other hand, he was a little bit more like, maybe it's a phase, what's going on? Because I was always closer with my mom, so my mom could really know something is wrong with her, like, this is like, something's off, this is not her. She comes back and she acts like a robot and she just regurgitates a narrative. So it was really, really painful for my mom.
And so, what happened during this process? Like you seem like you've been totally transformed. What's been the pathway out of this? Did you start to wake up a little bit in the university, or where did life take you to get to where you're at today?
I did not wake up while I was at school. I went woke while I was at school. So the pathway after, I actually went abroad for a year. I went to grad school. I got my master's in Barcelona, which should have been this amazing thing. But the whole time I was there, I was still really invested in wokeism. I remember I became a really extreme vegan because I was so consumed with the environment. And one of the reasons I went away
Mm.
is because when I graduated, I was so empty and anxious. And remember, I have turned my back on God at this point. So I am filling this void with ideologies and a purpose bigger than myself, which ends up becoming politics. So I ended up coming back from Europe in 2016. I worked on the Hillary Clinton campaign during this time that
Just one
I
question about
Mhm.
the time in
Yeah,
Barcelona. Was it obviously it was a very good school for you to go there. Had wokeism infiltrated in Barcelona, the elite university there that you attended, or was it just starting to come in, or was it captured as well?
it wasn't there at all. Was not
Oh,
there at all.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
Spain was actually a very, like, machismo country, and I remember being so appalled by that while I was there. This, like, idea of the macho man, because obviously, like, burned down the patriarchy was my mindset. So, whereas I tried to appreciate this experience, I also was, like, very lost, and one of the reasons I went there was because I was, like, running away from myself. I should ultimately I ended up running towards God, which is why I'm here today. But I went to Spain trying to get away from myself.
Yeah.
Turns out, like, you follow yourself even if you go across the country. Um, and during a lot of these phases where I didn't speak to my mom is when she was so concerned that she called a culta programmer. She also called treatment centers because I was so obsessed with, politics and feminism and wokeism and really worked it into every conversation. And so she's so distraught that she's, seeking, she would call prayer lines and have people pray for me. But internally it's very empty because you look at the world through this lens of bigotry that everything is attacking you or the cards are stacked against you and you're constantly in fight mode, so you're never actually at peace.
Were you being treated for mental health conditions at that point? Were you uh, under treatment for therapy or anything like that, or taking antidepressants, or were you not aware of the instability that your mind was in at that point?
I self-medicated with alcohol.
Oh, okay. And then, so what happened with this deprogramming? Where do you find one of those guys?
So I have never spoken to a deprogrammer. My mom's the one that spoke to them, and she got a wide variety of advice. Now, when you're in a cult, it's very interesting. The length of it is about 7 years normally from entering to exiting if you do come out of it. Also, girls are more likely to come out of it. I also think that young women are more susceptible to brainwashing because we're much more empathetic. So I have a theory that women are
Mm,
actually behind the woke movement and
yes.
everything that we're seeing, which is why for me, like, I really want to speak to women. That's what I'm passionate about, is like trying to deter young women from going down this path, instead going towards God. Um, but the deprogrammer told her that she should not affirm my new identities. And that was the best thing she could have done. So she did have to take a chance at one point, like I said, or I've in the past said I was estranged from her. So we went through a period where we didn't speak at all. She put her foot down. She was like, I'm not entertaining this. I'm not going to be spoken this way. Cause I also was very rude to her during this time. I was really mean. I was really combative. We see it all over the news. Like,
Mm.
people that are woke are really rude and really entitled. That's how I acted. And I was very disrespectful to her. And she was like, I'm not dealing with this. I'm not doing it. She put her foot down. She cut me off financially. She didn't talk to me for a period of time. And that was heartbreaking. And in her mind, the way she recalls it is that she said she was playing a chess game. Like, she was doing everything not to lose her child, like, in the long run. So she would have other family members or extended family friends kind of just check in on me to make sure I was okay or keep some sort of a lifeline. But she cut herself off from me. And that was actually the best thing that she could have done.
So it's interesting that you said that she maintained her convictions. She didn't acquiesce to go into your world. Yeah, I'd like to pursue that a little bit more. Like, it's not just the radical feminism or the critical feminist ideology, but like, what about pronouns and this new identity? Are you suggesting that parents, it might be best not to placate that or engage that, or if a child is saying that everything, a child or someone in their 20s, looks at everything through race? Do you engage that? Do you try to bring reason? Or I like what you're saying about the fact that your mom stood strong was kind of a lifeline to you, and then she involved other people from your past to reach out to you. I think that's great. But would you say that's a blanket approach that would be good, or do you have any opinion on those types of ideas?
Two things I want to address in the question you just asked. So the first one, I want to say that because you brought up pronouns. So having been in an environment that was very queer on my college campus, and I went there one way, very sure of who I was, and I left very confused about my identity. I really believe that the you know trans narrative that we're seeing, I, I think it's a what's the word? I'm sorry, I'm at a loss for words. A social condition is what I'm trying. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
So, like a social contagion, or
Contagion. That's the word.
go.
Yes, 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 yes. It's a social contagion, and I caught it. I caught the social contagion. Like it's true. I don't think that there are all these people that are born this way. I think that humans in general, we are constantly seeking a God consciousness. Like I think child,
Mm,
man, woman, baby, like we are all built, we all have a soul. We are spiritual beings, having a human experience. So no matter what, we're going to be seeking something. It just depends if we have the tools to seek God or if we don't have the tools, and so we seek external validations. So my advice to parents is your child, and if your child is very clearly a boy, and all of a sudden they go to school and maybe they're on their phone all the time, maybe they're really into social media, maybe they're a little awkward, maybe they're a little nerdy,
mm,
and so they don't have a ton of friends. If they all of a sudden come home and they're like, I feel a little different, you need to know that they're being validated at school, that the teachers, social media, their peers, they're telling them, oh, you feel a little weird. Maybe the answer is that you're not actually
mm,
a boy. Maybe the answer is that you're a girl. So if your kid comes home and they're like, Mom, I'm actually a girl, and they've been one way their entire life, it really is on parents to put their foot down and be like, no, you're not. You weren't a girl yesterday. You weren't a girl last year. Like, there is a deeper rooted issue. Let's get down to the deeper issue, because as soon as you open that door and then you get medication involved, I mean, you are going down a path that you cannot reverse.
mm. Yeah. So, what happens hypothetically? Well, I'm sure it's happening all over the United States and in the West. If you won't respect pronouns or the ideology where they manifest and they scream and they hate you, they go no contact. Is it do you negotiate space, or is it best to just stand firm and let them manifest or go through what they're going through, and then be a lifeline back? Or how do you handle that? Because it's so hurtful and traumatic for families being blown apart, and when the anger is mixed with it, what would be your overall advice then for parents? At what level do you acquiesce, and at what level do you just say, no, I'm not going to do this dance?
You really explained it perfectly about standing strong, letting your perhaps adult child go through what they go through, and then you being a lifeline
Mm,
back to themselves. That is exactly the path that my mom took. That's exactly what happened. And I really had to go through a lot of years of chaos, which is unfortunate, but I was able to come back. And I have an anecdote for you. So in this story, when I say it, it always gives me chills. When I entered school, when I entered Mount Holyoke in 2011, I had there was a girl that entered at the same time who was in my class. We had actually gone to lower school together in Manhattan. So we were friends as little girls, and then we lost touch for like 10 years because I moved away. And then we reconnected my first year, and she was one of my buddies. And she went through a similar path of, okay, she decided that like she had maybe always been gay. So she was pursuing, being a lesbian, which was very welcome and encouraged on campus. And I think that she'd maybe always been that way, but she kept it very repressed. She also went through an experience of sexual assault, which I think just reaffirmed that she wanted to have relationships with women. So when we were both seniors, our moms also reconnected because we were both going through the woke mind virus and were very rude to our parents who had given us everything. So our moms, sought each other to be like, what the heck is going on with our
Wow.
kids? Like, we used to be so close to them, and now they're coming home every vacation and just fighting with us, fighting, fighting, fighting about the environment, feminism, politics, whatever, like not being able to take a moment and just laugh. Like, we were so serious about everything. That's the other thing. Wokeness is like so serious all the time because you're just in fight mode. So this mom and my mom were emailing each other back and forth. And my mom in the email says, I'm so done with this. I'm not putting up with it anymore. I told Annabella, like, I wash my hands. Bye. The other mom says, yeah, I'm talking to a therapist, and the therapist says that I should just yes my daughter to death, and she'll outgrow it. So we fast forward to today. I went through the trials and tribulations on my own and with my mom, and my mom did what she needed to do, which was stand strong. And I have since returned and humbled myself and cleared my mind and now see things clearly. This other girl now lives across the country from her family, has completely transitioned into a man, and is living with a woman. So this parent that affirmed her daughter no longer has her daughter. Her daughter is literally now her son. And had she maybe taken the stance of, honey, I think something else is a matter here, and I'm not going to speak to you until you like show me kindness, things could look a lot differently for their family.
That is fascinating. I've actually had several detransitioners on the show that were into the gender ideology of wokeness, and all of them have, this is anecdotal as well, but they say the exact same thing. Do not do the pronoun ritual. None of them said it's appropriate, whether it's against compelled speech or feeding into the gender dysphoria or just going into the narcissism. It's they've all come free of it and said, do not do that dance. And I think that's interesting. I think if we as a society begin to see the capture of all of our institutions and the destruction of wokeism that absolutely produces nothing except pain and destruction, and DEI jobs. But if us as a society just say, no more, we're not doing this anymore, perhaps that would yield to better sociological changes. If it gets critical mass and we just say no more, on every level, and push back, not in a violent or a physical altercation, but just not giving in, and just, like you're a Christian, and Jesus says that the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And so we see this antichrist spirit that's against family, against God, against Jesus, and people that have faith are just stupid. And so there's this antichrist spirit that's operating in our institutions and in the minds of so many millions of people now, that's set itself up as an enemy of God, an enemy of faith. And so when the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, if the thief comes to your front door, you don't open up the door and say, oh, come on in and take some china, or don't, it'll come in and it'll just take over everything. And I find in my studying of this and analyzing and talking to people that were wrecked by this ideology, that it just absolutely destroys everything, including the victim itself, and it doesn't care. James Lindsay talks about when it comes into an institution, it wants control, it wants power, it wants to set the policy, and it doesn't matter if they kill the institution, they win, or if they take it over, they win. And I'm saying they in terms of the spiritual destructive force that's that hits people. And I believe, like you're hitting on, that God is our creator, and we all have a God-sized hole that needs to be filled by him or something else. And so it's been said that you don't have a choice of whether you're going to worship, it's what you worship. And I think we all have that need within us. So I'd like to talk about the spiritual component a little bit about this, and what you coming at it from a Christian perspective. How did that play into it, or was it more just the brokenness of that your life had become, or the consequences, or did you just start reading the Bible or something, or like what happened? How did you, I'd like to drill down a little bit more. You draw out of you more like how you went through that process of the deliverance you're enjoying today.
The emotional consequences became unbearable. So for me, the emotional consequences were daily panic attacks, also alcohol abuse, which then turned into prescription pill abuse. So now I'm going to doctors and saying I have crippling anxiety, like I need to take something for it. So I ended up on
Mm,
this horrific cycle of taking something to wake up, taking something to calm my jitters, and then going home and drinking. And at this point in my life, I was 25, and again, I went to a very prestigious college. I have a master's. I've worked on the Hillary Clinton campaign at this by this point, and I ended up working on Wall Street actually, because that's the thing with the intellectuals and wokeism is that even if your mindset is crippling you, like you still have this idea. Well, if my resume looks really good, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
mm,
So I got really good jobs, and I at this point have this really great job. I'm living in New York City. I on paper have all these things going for me, but inside and am totally, totally empty and broken. And I'm looking at myself in the mirror and I don't know who I am. And I don't have a great relationship with my family, even though at this point, again, because it's 2018, the beginning of 2018, like I was trying to because I so desperately wanted to like just kind of be back to where I was, as a
mm,
child, like just that happiness. And I couldn't figure out what it was. I ended up um, kind of a crazy story. It was a Sunday, July 5 years ago. I was in New York City, and I remember thinking I was so anxious and I was so depressed and I was so empty and so broken. And my learned coping mechanism was to drink something. And I really didn't want to do that anymore. And I ended up like going for a walk late at night in New York City, and I actually found myself outside of a church. And I remember I called my mom as I'm walking in because I'm trying to have a relationship with her, and I'm telling her how like
mm,
anxious I am. And at about 9:45 at night, she was like, "Where are you?" And I told her that I was standing outside of a church, and she was like, "Go in. Why don't you just go in?" And I was like, "No, no, no. I'm not going to go in." And she said, "Just go in." And for whatever reason that night, I was actually receptive. And I went inside this church, and there happened to be a 12-step meeting going on. And there was a speaker. It was another 25-year-old guy, and he was saying that he had like all these things, had gone to college, had a degree, had a job, but was so empty inside, and like he was self-medicating with drugs and alcohol, and he stopped and he got sober. And as soon as he got sober, he reconnected with a higher power, and like basically all of his problems went
mm,
away. And so it hit me like, okay, I want to try that. And that first 12-step meeting is what set me on a path of I am going to live different because what I've been doing has not been working. And the first step was just going on a cleanse. I quit drinking and quit taking any drugs, and I also started to learn how to pray. I didn't even know how to pray. I had to have someone remind me like, this is what you do, this is what you say. I didn't believe in God, I didn't really believe in anything at that point, but I was open minded to it. And so bit by bit, just kind of searching,
mm,
you know I ended up moving back down to Florida, moving in with my family, working on that relationship, working on my sobriety, getting a new job, and just slowing things down a bit. And my life completely changed. And I woke up and I realized, oh, I don't have anxiety anymore. Oh, I'm not depressed anymore. And what's even more amazing is that I had been so obsessed with politics and ideology. And as soon as I reconnected with God, it's like the chains of it just started to fall off. Now I hadn't, changed my mind yet, or my like party registration, if you will, until 2020. And 2020 happens to be when we had lockdowns. So it was during the lockdowns, I'm on my echo chamber of social media and I'm seeing the riots and I'm watching people burn down buildings in the name of empowerment. It just kind of hits me. This is so hypocritical. Um, and that's when the lights kind of turned on, like, okay, I'm like just progressivism in general is a lie. Like I need to look for answers elsewhere. At that same time, I had also started going back to church because I was at a point where I was like, okay, I want
mm.
to actually have a religion and really, be connected to a community. So I was saved in 2020. So if we fast forward to today, from 2020 to today, I go through this whole spiritual awakening. I realize I've been lied to by the left. I realize that conservative values, also conservative politics are definitely the way to go. I end up working for PragerU, and God just puts me in the position where I have this story come out. So the New York Post decides they want to do a profile on me and my mom and the story of getting brainwashed in college. I then go on Tucker Carlson and I talk about it, and getting this
Wow.
exposure, yeah, getting this exposure leads to hundreds of parents reaching out to me, and they are so distraught, and they say, my kid went away to school. They came back a completely different person. We no longer have a relationship. And I'm just getting flooded with these emails. And I'm like, this is
Wow.
crazy. Like, something's up here. And so I start looking into it a little bit more. And it turns out that a quarter of Americans are estranged from a family member. It's actually it's more like 27%. So estrangement is now the silent epidemic. And people are really ashamed and embarrassed because when you don't have a good relationship with your
Mm.
immediate family member, like it creates so much tension. Like, my mom was not advertising that I wasn't speaking to her, we weren't speaking to each other when we went through our period of estrangement. um so my mission now is, I've talked to so many parents and I'm trying to get to the bottom of what this is, and there are a few things at play. So it is the classroom, it is Hollywood, it is social media. Young Americans are being brainwashed into believing that their parents are narcissists. So narcissists, and you can pull up if you want, the 1 in 4 Americans are estranged or this one. Yes. So narcissism, we could see, okay, people with a narcissistic personality disorder often come across as selfish or superior, but it's because they're making up for a fragile sense of self-worth. This disorder can make it hard to get along with others, but counseling can help with NPD, can help people with NPD learn healthy ways to connect with others. Great. Okay. So narcissism is actually only about 5% of the population. It is very, very, very small. Kind of like how transgenderism is like 0.01% of humans actually suffer from gender dysphoria. But we're seeing it at such larger numbers, right? The social contagion I mentioned before. So
Mm.
I have discovered that on social media, so Instagram and TikTok, there are these hashtags called hashtag going no contact, hashtag gray rock, hashtag narcissistic parent, hashtag toxic family, because wokeism
What
loves.
is gray rock? Gray rock, you said?
So gray rock, if you look up that hashtag or similar words with it,
Hmm.
it gives teenagers steps to fade their parents out of their lives while they are still under the same roof. So gray rocking is, I come home from school, mom's like, "Hey, honey, how was this and how was that?" and tell me about your day. And so instead of opening up and telling her all about my day, I just give her little nuggets. So maybe like, "Oh yeah, class was good. I learned this." And I gray rock by giving fewer and fewer nuggets. So I am building up this boundary and I am shutting her out.
That's horrible.
It's horrible. It's horrible. And young Americans are being told to do this because they're being brainwashed through their phones, through their classroom. It's also cool. Kids go through this period of rebellion, but they are being convinced that their
Mm.
parents are narcissists. So they're given a word to label their parents as, which is exactly what wokeism and the Democratic Party does. They give you a label. So for me, it was woman. That was my identity that I really clung to. Or if you're a minority, they give you this label. So now that's like your whole existence and your whole purpose and your whole identity. So if you're a kid who's now, like, maybe you're just going through being a teenager, which can be a little bit emotional, and your mom upsets you because they're like, why were you late to dinner? You're all of a sudden like, wow, okay, she must be a narcissist because this post on the internet really resonates with how I feel right now, so this must be the solution. Okay, here's the solution.
Wow.
Mom's a narcissist. I'm not going to talk to her anymore. I'm joining this community of other victims of narcissistic parents. It's a lie. Your parent's probably not a narcissist because it is so rare, and it is horrific brainwashing. And I think, again, it goes back to this idea of Marxism and breaking down the family unit. When we isolate people, they are more vulnerable. They are more reliant on, the government. We really saw this during
Yes.
COVID. I mean, addiction rates went up, depression rates went up, suicide rates went up. Nobody talks about that. Um, so I think that there is a plan, and it is the enemy. For me, it is spiritual, it is demonic, but this is a tool that's being used to create a divide within households. So kids are being given resources to literally shut their parents out of their life for no reason.
And with social media being so popular and kids being drawn to this and being supported by uh, friends and friend groups or social media chat rooms, what's the solution here? Is there anything that can be done other than take your 18-year-old cell phone away? I mean, is there anything? It's good to have the awareness, but is there any practical things that families can do and parents can do?
Yes, you just mentioned one of the solutions. It's totally practical to take your kid's phone away. So, if your kid is still in the house and they're exhibiting this behavior, I would recommend taking away their social media, like making them go on a cleanse, if you will, for 30
Oh,
days. Also, making them touch base with whatever extracurricular that is tied to their youth. So for me, when I was going through my healing process of kind of reconnecting with my faith and also with my family, I picked up figure skating again, and it really like connected me with my child self. So I encourage parents to like take their kids for a walk or take them to church, teach them how to pray, like give them the skills to know if they are starting to experience some sort of internal chaos, they have something to turn to. But I definitely think like taking your kid out of that environment is crucial. And so many parents, our egos are connected with what school our kid goes to or what school
mhm.
we go to. Like parents need to stand up and be like, okay, if this teacher is giving my kid propaganda that's going to have them question their identity or their sexuality, like I am removing them from this school. Like you need to stand up and protect your kid at all costs because there are so many influences coming after them at all angles. And if you don't try to protect them,
Mm,
they're going to fall into this. Like there is no way that let's say the example of like a 13-year-old can be the light in the darkness. If you're a 13-year-old, even no matter what you tell them at home, if they're going to a school that's super woke, they're going to catch it. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
wow.
So yeah, you might want to consider transferring.
Now, you said that your mom was not only proactive, looking into the deliverance from the cult, but she was also, it sounds like, proactive of contacting other people, friends and family from your past to reach out to you. Did you resent that? Did you know she was doing that? Was it good to hear from those people, or did you just think that that you were just so much smarter than them and you wanted to cut all those people out too? Like, is that a good thing for parents to do, to engage others to help?
It is a very good thing. One thing my mom did was actually have old coaches reach out to me. I did not know that she was behind it. I thought it was organic, and I was actually very receptive to it because in that period, even though I didn't want to humble myself and talk to my parents, I was still seeking and I was hurting. And so if someone from my past reached out, like I was fairly open to it. Um, it was brilliant on her part, honestly. I think that she was so smart. Like I said, she looked at everything as playing a chess game, and she won. Fortunately, which is good. But yes, I think it was a really good tactic, and also just from the perspective of if an extended family friend is checking in, you at least know that like your kid is alive and safe. Because at that point, I was also living in another state. I had friends that she didn't know.
Mm.
I was hanging out with people she didn't know. So having a lifeline back to the past, which is who I truly am, was very instrumental in helping me get out of the cult.
No, it sounds like you've been inundated with parents, help, help. What do I do? And how about your mom? Is she helping other parents now, or what types of things are you doing as a family? Because it's just a fascinating story, and this thing needs to be told. And are there good things happening with people reaching out to your mom? I mean, because this is everywhere.
Yeah, there are great things happening, and I really would love to introduce you to my mom. One very cool story is this woman, Beth Pensky. She found me through, I think, LinkedIn. And she actually did a follow up interview with the New York Post. And she's now called the Warrior Mom because she has such a similar story. Her kids were actually in school in Western Massachusetts at the same time that I was there. And she doesn't have a relationship with them at all anymore. And it's so sad. Her kids have not come back, but she's now speaking out about it, that she went through this. So I think one, awareness, parents understanding that like they're not alone. This is happening. There is an agenda to take your kids and they are being brainwashed and it is like a cult. So you need to really treat it that way. Um, this is not something to be looked at lightly. It is amazing how many parents have reached out. My mom's actually set up a foundation, the Rockwell Foundation, so that she can just basically talk to parents full time all day. She's talking to them, trying to give them strategies of what she did, just hear them out, see maybe if it's similar to what I went through. Oftentimes, we found that there's normally a significant other involved. That was my case. I was dating someone at the time. There's normally a significant other that the victim is completely attached to, who won't allow them to, or who encourages them to cut off communication with their family. One pop culture reference I like to give is Prince Harry and Meghan Markle. I think it's a really good example of
Mm.
family estrangement and rewriting of your own history. I mean, Harry came out with this book where his whole perspective was being a victim, and it's like, dude, you grew up a prince. But he's totally fallen for it, and like I would say, everyone like pray for him because it'd be really great if he came out of it and reconnects with his family and humbles himself. I think it's a good example of what's happening on a micro level with a lot of parents. So another thing my mom's done is she connects parents together so that they have a network, a support system who can hold each other accountable, because a lot of moms will call me and be like, I haven't heard from my daughter in this long. What do I do? What do I do? I missed her. I want to reach out. And we kind of have to be the bad guy and say, don't reach out. You can't, because you can push them farther away. It's almost like dealing with someone that is in an addiction or someone that is experiencing an eating disorder. Like if your daughter is anorexic, you're not going to tell them, yeah, honey, you're fat, you shouldn't eat. I think the same goes with if your child is confused about their gender. Like if you love someone, you tell them the truth, and the truth is hard. But if you love someone, you tell them you're born a woman, you can't become a man. It's just not possible. I love you. Like, let's figure out what's really wrong here.
Yeah.
So that's a long-winded answer of we
You know,
talk to parents all the time and we connect them.
that reminds me of a really good friend of mine who's suffering estrangement with his kids. He's well into his 60s, and some of his kids he's having some estrangement with, and he said nothing works. I can't reason with them. They don't let me speak. And then he said, I'll wait a few months and I'll write this letter and I'll rewrite it and rewrite it. I'll run it through Grammarly and I'll make every comma perfect. And surely they're going to listen to this, and nothing. It's just more estrangement. So would you recommend letters or notes or birthday cards, or just let it be totally? I'm sure every case is different.
Every case is different, but the overall theme is let it be. And sadly, I would tell your friend he can write the letter, he shouldn't send it. It's a good exercise for himself. I think journaling is really helpful. There are also 12-step programs for parents that they can do. I don't know if there's one for estranged parents. I know there's a 12-step program for parents of addicts. And I think it's really similar principles if you instead just like sub the word. It's more having that support system, having tools, also knowing that the parents aren't to blame. I think that parents probably put a lot of blame on themselves. Like it's not their fault. At some point, maybe there are some things, but you can't really control your child or someone else. And I think also on the flip for kids that, I talk about this, and I'm talking about fairly normal households, like parents who maybe they work and they love their kids, and all of a sudden their kid doesn't talk to them and they don't understand what happened. Like that's what I'm shedding light on. Like I'm not talking about the person that actually does grow up in a really chaotic household and their parents are alcoholics and life is terrible. Like there are probably scenarios where you should estrange yourself, and in those scenarios too, like there are 12-step programs to help with that. I'm a really big advocate for a recovery program as opposed to going to a therapist. And my reason is that the therapists all went to the liberal schools.
That's right. They're woke therapists.
They're woke therapists, and there is a strain of therapy called CBT. It's cognitive behavioral therapy, and one of the principles is going no contact. And I just think that you have more of a chance of getting over whatever you're going through if you're leaning on other people that are going through the same thing, as opposed to going to a therapist that's just going to talk about it, unpack it, and they're going to maybe unconsciously give you tools that are stemmed in Marxism. So I'm kind of on the I wouldn't go to a therapist about it unless it's someone that is Christian faith based. I'd go to your pastor, I'd go to a church. I'm very hyper aware now of where I seek guidance and advice. And for me, like I really only turn to Christian based resources.
I don't know if you're doing this. I'm just fascinated. I think that, hey, you got a master's degree. You're very articulate. And I think you need to put out your shingle and your mom and just get the word out there, and then set it up where it's fee-based. I'm giving you like a business idea where you can actually counsel with parents on what to do, what not to do, how to do this, what the kid might be going through. I think it would be brilliant, especially with 27% estrangement and parents are totally lost. And what's the best thing to do? What are some of the tools that they could have? If you write a book, I mean, this is just absolutely fascinating to me to hear your story and the clarity in which you see things, and the knowledge of the spiritual dimension of this, and the brainwashing and the cult-like atmosphere. I think it just brings so much clarity to people that are really in a dark place, just like, what the heck? I failed as a parent, but where am I now? What do I do? How do I get healing for myself? How do I, manage my day to day when my child isn't even talking to me anymore? I mean, I think you guys can be so helpful, and it just seems like it's so needed. And I don't know if there's people out there doing that, but I don't know. Is it something you'd like to do sometime, or have you thought about that? Are you doing it? Or I love starting new businesses. So I can see you being incredibly in high demand, and make it fee-based too, where you can, compensate for your time and actually make a living doing it.
I'm definitely open to it. I would love to help people, and I also do need to support myself. I actually very recently, it's funny you say that, I felt compelled to leave the job I had. I was fundraising for an organization, and I feel like the Lord told me it's time to start your own thing. And so I am working towards it. Happy for any business advice as a very, very new entrepreneur, because I want to have the most impact that I can. And you have to devote full time your thoughts and your energy into this, because it really it's an emotional journey talking through everything with these parents. But yeah, if you want to help me set it up, by all means, Michael.
All right. Well, we're gonna put links on the show notes for both you and your mom, and maybe your mom not gonna like getting all these calls, but I think you guys are. God brought you through something as a family,
Yeah.
and He brings us through things for us to help others. It's not about us. It's like you went through hell and back, and you understand the mindset. You understand how this virus works, and I think you guys are such a great resource for families and people that, I think society is just trying to catch up to where this woke ideology has taken us. And I would love for you, for there to be more resources out there, and the clarity that you have in your mind and your mom, and the proper boundaries for everybody, and how do you communicate love without pushing away, and where do you take a stand, where don't you? I mean, there's so many nuances to it, and I think going through it, you can offer a lot of support and a lot of encouragement to people, and so I think it's exciting where you're at in your life. And you were with Prager University, and you had a very successful position there, but you were being drawn into something else. And so hopefully it's along these lines, because you really have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in our culture. And it's a big deal what's going on in our country. And I think I want to encourage you. I want to encourage your mom too, and thank her for being the strong woman of character, and in the midst of her pain, that she made some decisions that were undoubtedly very tough for her. And And so I thank you. I thank you for coming on the show today. And I'm just encouraged listening to you and hearing your heart and feeling the, the reality of the rawness of life that you've been brought through and where you're at today and the optimism that you have. And so I'd like to give you the last word on anything in your heart to share with our audience. We have three goals in the show. Number one is to help people that are dabbling with the mind virus or this ideology to avoid it. And if we can help somebody from not getting sucked into it, wonderful. The show has met its goal. Or two, people like yourself when you were in the university that are steeped in the ideology, because you're not going to win a debate or an argument, but maybe give them some tools to begin to look at the world differently. And then three, give hope to families or friends of that have been affected by the loss and the personality changes in their loved one. And so I just want to give you, Annabella, the last word and to speak about whatever is in your heart.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for all of your kind words and all of your guidance. And I'm definitely excited for what the future has in store and what God will use me to do. I'm just very open for all of it, and I want to help people. And I'll say that for this method works for I use this, and it can apply for both parents and also for the young person that's maybe feeling the chaos, because our society is so addicted to chaos right now. And what I do is I call it stay calm. So it's cleanse, which is maybe 30 days, like don't drink, don't take anything, perhaps put your phone away, delete your social media for a month. Ask. That means, seek God, seek the universe, whatever you want to call it, ask for guidance, try
Mm.
praying. Listen. That means meditate, even if it's a minute. Like you can just start somewhere. You take a minute of your day just stopping everything and just breathing, or you can download an app. There's this app called Insight Timer. I think it's really helpful, and you can listen to like bells or raindrops for a minute. And the last one is move. I think if you move a muscle, you change a thought. So if you're kind of
Mm.
stuck in the obsession, the spiraling, so whether it's you're young and you're like really consumed with what's in front of your face, maybe it's politics, maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's, culture, society, what have you. Or if you're a parent on the other side and you're consumed with going through estrangement, I think it really helps to like go for a walk, go to the gym or go for a drive. Just put yourself literally in a different environment. So it's calm, cleanse, ask, listen, move. And works for me.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I really appreciate you and thank you. This has been an excellent time together, and thank you so much for coming on the show and your vulnerability. And may God bless you and your family and prosper you and get clarity for direction, and that may your story impact and help many people to live in the freedom and the victory that you have, and avoid those years of darkness that your precious family suffered.
Thank you so much, Michael.
Okay, well, thank you.